Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Plus Three Futures and Commodities Show. We are recording here at 9 a.m. on Saturday, the 21st of February. My name is Ben Maldonado, and as always, I'm here with my partner, Barry Hederachi. Barry, how we doing?
Doing good, doing good. Getting a little stir crazy, but
It is what it is, right? So the theme this week we were talking, with the latest tariff news, the chaos in the world is off the charts. So it's time for us to focus solely on the charts and price action. Block out the noise. Look at what the charts and price action are telling us, and based on that, assess probabilities of what's going to happen next. So that's the theme. It's sort of back to basics. Let's start with the S&P, which has been perfectly sideways, but
mhm.
there is some signal in all this noise, isn't there?
Well, we are making we talked about last week, we talked about how the cycle highs came in here. We had one exactly on the end of January, the January 28th high, and then we had a earlier cycle high that came in first week of January, a little bit later than first week, around the 13th. Our thesis so far has been, cycle highs came in. Once that happens, until those highs get taken out, we have to consider the other side, which means, so what is that? So if a cycle high comes in, what's the other side? Other side is we're looking for some kind of a correction. So we talked a lot about that last week. Correction could be in time or it could be in price. In this case, it turns out so far it's been in time. And that's just from the time these later cycle highs came in, right? But we had other cycles come in, October, end of October, I believe early part of December. And all of those gave little reactions, but we kept steaming, higher. And really you can see, we kept making pretty good steady, every time we corrected, the buyers came in, corrected, buyers came in, corrected, buyers came in, and we kept pushing higher highs, very clear, right? And all through there, we were just waiting, we were looking at because of the other cycles, the greater cycles, we were watching, for potential false breaks, like we had one here. And sure enough, after that, we were down for 4 days. So, we've got the little reactions. Of course, there are no guarantees if it's a big reaction or not, coming off of a false break or something of that sort. So, but we've been getting little reactions, but you can see the buying always pushed it higher. But ever since that last square came in, which if you remember, Ben, you're the one who called it out like a weeks before, go, hey, what if that happens? And ever since that, we've been getting lower highs and lower lows. Not by much, granted, but still the character changed, right? Here, the pullbacks we were buying up and pushing to new highs, and all of a sudden, now after the cycles came in, now we're pushing, and the buying can't push into new highs, right? Not, and of course, we tapped that huge 7,000 resistance, which just happens to be 270 degrees up on the cash chart. So that's a big signal as far as I'm concerned. We talked about signal to noise last week, and if you just look at this, it looks very messy. But the big difference is we are making lower lower highs and we're making lower lows marginally, sure, but it's definitely opposite of higher highs and higher lows. So that's my starter. What do you think, Ben? I mean, that's really what's clear to me.
That's the information we're getting from the price action on the charts. No question about it.
hmm And the question, the next part two is always, okay, well, what now? And the thing in trading is, if something is happening, you just continue to do that until it doesn't. So long as we're making lower highs and lower lows, we have to be looking at those counter trends and getting positioned as your systems give you the setups and the signals. So I think we're back to that, and we're not so much buying these as much as we're selling until our systems flip. It'll have to flip at some point, either when we start making higher highs and higher lows, or at least to start making some higher lows. But we're not in any of that. We're not doing any of that. So for next week, well, last week, let me just recap really quick. We spent a lot of time on this last week. We talked about this low, Friday low, and we were going to pivot off of that. If we take out the low, we could get down into 67.27 territory. And if we take out the high, we have the 69.09 to deal with, and obviously move higher. And then on Wednesday, obviously we had a 1 day counter trend, and then we had a reversal, right? We had a Thursday low took out the low of Wednesday. So all right, so now what can we expect next? Are we going to go lower, which set that up to be a pretty good reversal? Lower high, everything's in place. Of course, we turn around and we go higher, and we take out the Wednesday high. So now we're back in the mix again. When you see the 30-minute chart or the 4-hour chart, it's very clear. We're not these points where normally we use to get positioned or to see if something is unfolding. In trading, it's always about, we have part of the pattern and we're looking for it to unfold. First, we have the identification, then we have the eventuality, and then and there's a certain probability that that outcome is going to happen. So far, the lower highs have been working, but the follow through is not great, and the counter trends off of these new lows are huge. So it's not showing a whole lot of weakness. If you just isolate this and look at it, it's not showing a whole lot of weakness. If you look at the Dow, it's not showing a whole lot. And so you have to kind of continue to, we talked about it earlier, if the market is doing something, we have to kind of follow that through till it stops doing that. And we're trapped in this little consolidation. The only thing we can make out so far is ever since the cycle high, we're starting to weaken a little bit, soften a little bit. We're starting to get lower lows, lower highs. Now, the question is, can that pattern continue? So if next week we go up and take out last week's high, obviously the whole thing shifts. Now, if we go higher, we get a reversal, we come down and take out these lows from this week, obviously the entire pattern shifts. But in this very tight pattern for now, ever since late January, ever since the January 28th high and this week's low in that little box, we have to be careful. It's not a lot of room to move around. So we'll look at the patterns that we've been trading off of the fuse lines a little bit later. But we're down to 4-minute charts, 5-minute charts because a little bit choppy out there. So 30 minutes are fine. They're working great. But as it squeezes in, you just either step back and wait for your systems to give your normal signals, or, this is not the time to force the issue just because we're getting bored, right? You can always look for other markets or get down to a level that you can handle the risk. Anything you want to add to that, Ben, before we move on to the other charts?
I think that's great advice, especially looking at other markets, because as we'll see when we go over the commodities today, a lot of things are perking up, even cotton, which has been asleep for 2 years. So there's opportunity elsewhere as well.
Exactly. All right, so that's the cash chart. Let's move on to, well, let's look at the continuous futures. There's a calendar chart. It's pretty much the same pattern. We didn't make a new low here, but did a sort of a false break on the last Friday's low. Low reversed, and we're kind of holding in place. Not a lot of info to go on, but I am kind of watching the lower highs, and this is triangulating. So here now we have a sort of a triangle forming, probably more compression, and we just have to continue to watch all this till something clear happens. Obviously, we're also getting into prime territory for a run up, false break, and come back down. I mean, the most positive pattern I would like to see is, if we're going to be bullish, let's just break out, come back. I mean, we're going to have a hell of a roof here, hell of a floor at this point. If we get up here, this is going to be amazing support. So I think the upside is going to be pretty healthy if we can get above and hold above this 7,000 level. So that's something to look forward to. If that happens, false breaks, well, fine. Let's see. We have to break through this and get below the 68.17 level, we can do that. All right. We might be able to set up to the downside. Everything's sort of on the table. Let's see. Markets are never, what, Ben, I was thinking the other day. When we try to interpret, we think in terms of, well, make it higher lows, higher highs, or some simplistic pattern, like a reversal, false break. But when the market starts to, move, you can see how complex all these bars are. We have an inside bar, we have a, up day, down day, outside. And when we're interpreting it, I don't know, at least my brain, I can't get into all the possibilities of how a market's going to move forward, even if it's just 5 bars. It sounds crazy. But, so we don't know how we're going to get out of this, but we know the upper boundary. We know we're making lower highs. So let's watch that. At least the futures, we can see that we made a higher low. So let's watch that. So with the lower high and higher low, we're compressing. So there's a potential to break hard in either direction. So that's another thing to watch. I hate, this is why I think we all traders just really dislike having to deal with these kind of expansive patterns or contraction patterns when it's stuck in a very tight range. Well, it's time to just sit back and wait for clarity. I guess that's the thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's the front month. Again, you can see the highs came in at the 50% of the square. And, the lower boundary, the real lower boundary here is 67.36. So, nothing really weak, any big weakness really till we get below that. All this is great. Now we have a pretty big range. I'm not going to count this in because the last couple of months we've been very tightly within the range, 7,000 change and 67.36. So we'll see how we do. I don't have a whole lot of good news. So for either case, right? Bears are getting burned and the bulls are getting burned unless they're on short leashes. Just you have to cover your base as fast as you can. So 70.25 is pretty much the upper boundary, and 67.36 is a lower on the front month. Let's continue to watch that. Let's take a quick look at the Dow and then the NASDAQ, and then we'll look at some short-term stuff. So the Dow is holding. I mean, we were straddling this a week before last, and now we're back. So you can see this 49,484 area holds something because, well, for one thing, we haven't been able to settle above it, and we haven't quite settled below it. And we're just straddling it. I mean, the whole week we straddled it. Last Friday we straddled it. And I would say for the Dow, we really need we need a resolution above or below this. Otherwise, it's just chop. Look, one of the biggest things is to know when the market is not trending. And one way we use these levels is, the reason we say wait for it to clear, if it gets on that side or this side, it's not like any other line. If you guys follow our work long enough, you'll see we can always come up with a line. There's different ways to generate these things. But as far as Gann lines go, waiting for it to clear one of these lines really pays off because your odds of your system giving a directional setup that's going to work is much greater, right? The odds of that is much greater once we settle on one side. So above 49,484, it's a much higher probability that we're going to reach higher towards 51,000, 52,000. We get below and we start getting the weakness in the right patterns, the price action, then it's highly likely we get back down to 47. So that's the basic theory across all the markets that we watch. And all it's doing is telling us when it's trending, when it's not trending. And even if you're doing counter trend, you can tell, if it gets into one of these quarter square, we can't do anything and you get a sell setup on your systems, well, you have a much higher probability of it working to the downside as a counter trend trade than not, right? So anyway, just to reinforce that. Okay, this is another continuation chart. Not much to talk about here. This is the high that squared out, the cycle high that came in. This is the first one. This is the second one. It's after that we've been making these lower highs. Now we're triangulating. So let's see which way. Now, if we break to the downside, it's going to be pretty epic, but it's possible that we false break to the upside too. We held the zone that we marked off, so that part's okay. And then, we talked about taking out Friday's low. Well, we did that false break. And on the counter trends, we held above it and moved right on up, right? And then we consolidate on this other zone. And this last Friday, we managed to push above. So my thinking is if we can hold any counter trend on this chart, if we can hold above 68.70, I'm thinking this is a little bit more stable, right? So that's one way to look at that. Let's move on to the NASDAQ, which is really interesting because we broke below this 25,140, pulled back, counter trend, couldn't hold above the level, broke down again. And now last week, 2 days, we tapped the line exactly right here and right there. And sellers stepped in. Again, here we go. We have a line here, 135 degrees up, 25,140. Earlier we were above it, tapping it, but really couldn't get going. Then we had this other cycles that came in, 90 high to high, 72 degrees, the solar degrees low to high, and the market started to correct. The NASDAQ, I guess that really the thing to watch is if we can settle above this 25,000 or not. If we can get above 25,140, great, settle above that. Pretty much like this, but we want to see it hold above, not slip under. Kind of like the example in Dow. So here, or if we get stuck below, we start making lower highs. Well, then we have weakness and I marked out this 23,700 to be the first line of support below this. The lines are getting pretty clear. We have at least a triangle here. Lower part is getting pretty clear. Triangle, I'm thinking of the square line, the 25,140 square line with the trend line, right? So either this is going to break to the upside or we fail. Obviously, in this kind of a mess, it easily falls break to either side. So we have to watch those. There's no way to get around those. Let's take a quick look at the weekly, see if that's any help. And here's the weekly chart. Ben, what do you make of this? I mean, this is where we're getting the frustration, right? Look how many
Yeah.
weeks we have to deal with
Yeah.
this damn thing.
Yeah. Those
Um,
expanding triangles are frustrating.
right. So anyway, well, here we are. Well, the other part was here, the fun part was trending. And we talked about, well, how long can we trend like this, such a steep angle without a correction. So now we're getting one and it's a correction, all right, but it's in time, which actually, this kind of a correction is actually bullish. And you can see like we're tapping this, we're hanging on to the lower part of the square. So, on a secondary level, we want to always keep an eye on that side and to see how we resolve this. But looking at this weekly, it sure doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. And also, this line that I've drawn, part of it is imaginary, right? I mean, if you erase this part, we could easily be just sideways without the expansion part. But we do have a little bit of that, couple of bars here, couple of bars here, the beginning of one. Well, whatever is said and done, this old high back in November high, this area seems to be that weekly open seems to be the center line. So, and now we're below that. And last week we spent a lot of the open and the close below that. See the red bar here and the green bar. So before that, we were most of the price action was above it for the entire week, and now we're below that. So, is that it? Now we're going to try to move up and make a lower high and roll over, or are we going to continue to push higher, go back and test this high? There's a lot of work to be done for the upside. This is not going to be easy because of the way we set up. And we talked about last week how when we have these kind of squares come in and the market breaks to the upside, well, it's going to be very strong, right? So we could have a very, very strong move right up into probably 7,500, 72 at least here. So that's one. So remember that if we can't get it above the 7,000, then obviously the other side is the downside. So we keep talking about that, but the downside, they're giving, it's coming at pennies at a time. All right, so that's that. Here's the continuation chart, futures weekly. This is that little circle square thing we've been watching so far. Um, just looking at the signal, right? Forget the news, forgetting everything. If I were to look at this without knowing, if I were in a vacuum, you can see, we got a high come in, we have a lower high, yet another lower high. We have three lower highs, and then the fourth one was this week. And you can't say the sellers are moving up the ladder, and they're moving down the ladder. And yeah, sure, there's some buying coming in here and there, but this is more messy, right? Sellers are more organized. So let's see. So when that stops, that's going to be the first of the sign, you know. And remember, we had a good false break at the high that came in on the weekly before, we dropped, false break, and then we began this other business. Now, last week I mentioned how we had an inside bar. This week you can see we took out the low of the inside bar, but we didn't quite take out the high. So going into next week, just keep that in mind, right? We have to kind of watch these price action around this, because this is going to be, you'll see as we go into months, you'll see how this chart's going to be a sort of a defining pattern that's going to help us sort of figure out the puzzle. Anyway, that's what I have to add to that. Ben, you have anything to add?
Just when you're jammed in that corner, big moves usually come out of those. So
Either way, right? I mean,
yeah, it could be
upside would
either
be
way.
phenomenal coming out of here. It's not going to be a grind,
Right.
but if we stay here, I mean, I can't see why we should really tap at least a quarter square. That would give us a decent correction. A really good
Sure.
one would, get us down into the 64 in here.
Right.
And so let's see what happens. Otherwise, we could grind a little higher, still be within the circle and be less than the eighth of the next square. So that would get us into September, man. I mean, that's a long way.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of things can happen on the weekly. All right, we'll
Sure.
we'll follow through and we'll see what happens. All right, to close off the indices, take a look at the weekly, the 30 minute. Yeah, speaking of the Friday low, you can see how we came right down into the 67.90. I have some new levels on this, so if you guys are following these levels, write these down, because coming off of a different point. Anyway, 67.90 became the low. 68.42 was the key level to watch if we can hold above it or not. Remember last week we talked about that zone. So we came down, we flushed everything out, reversed, and the pullback held above the 68.26, which was an important level, ran back up. And from here on, this was overnight. We held above 68.42. And once we started to come off of that, so that was a good move, going up to 69, which was 69 was resistance most of all week. Came back down to 68.62, pushed higher. Now here, if we held above, fine, we can go up and test 69.34 up on here if we didn't. So then we got weak again, lower high, triangle broke to the downside. Again, you can see how we came very close to 68.42, but we didn't get under it. Recovered again, 69. This was a good sell here, coming off of the false break against that other earlier high. And back down again. But on this one, we made a false break. This was the big telltale on Friday, right? We made a false break, and above 68.42, false break against the prior low. That was a good setup, but I had no idea it was going to be run like that. Anyway, we got up here, a lot of chopping here, but again, you can see the pullbacks are holding higher. This one held about 68.62. And I think my morning post on Friday, we were looking for some kind of a grind higher if we held 68.42, which we did with flying colors. And then, we pushed up against the next resistance, which is 69.34. So for next week, it's really the battles between 6,900, pullbacks holding above that is very positive. And if we can clear 69.34, we have 69.72 as the next big level of resistance. So that's what we're working with. If you slip below this, of course, we got more of that. All right, what else do we have? I wanted to, Ben, if it's okay, I wanted to look at the fuse lines really quick. So here's for the 17th, and fuse line, we post this in the morning right around the open or before, a little bit before, sometimes a little bit after, but usually before. But anyway, it's useful. And it was 68.31. You can see we first of all, there's lots of ways to trade this. If you the longer you watch it, the better, the more ways you'll figure out how to trade along with the tools and the perspective that you have of the market. So I'm giving a very basic view, that anybody can understand, but you can plug this into pretty much any system and do better. 68.31. And if you guys have any ideas in the way you do it, let me know in the comments. Yeah, or if you have any questions. I have a pinned post on X that you can always check. We have little patterns that are pretty reliable. And if you like our work, come to think of liking, if you like our work, please, or any part of our work in here, please remember to hit like and subscribe, share. And back to the fuse. So we went below, came back up, tapped it, and sold off. And that was that low that we talked about, right? The false break. Ran back right up, back through it, and the pullback held. Especially, okay, this pullback, you can see how it reversed, came back, higher low, and that worked out moving into the high of the day. This is for the 18th. You see 68.74 was the fuse line. This is the opening range, broke to the upside. And here we had the second fuse line, and that eventually broke down right to the morning fuse line, and we rallied from there. So the two big trends were, coming off the open higher and then coming off the highs for the day lower, right? So that worked. And here's the 19th, very messy day. And here's the fuse line at 68.74. If you want to eke out some trades in this kind of a mess. Anyway, there was a trade in the morning, we could have taken that, basically breaking this triangle. And then counter trend, it stalled out at 68.74. That one worked. And then this next counter trend stalled below 68.74. That went down higher low. They got to watch those. And once we broke above, and here's a classic, we break above, come back to retest that line, and then we took off. So on these corners, if you have counter trend systems, that's where you can use them. Here's Friday's chart. We have 68.56 was the level. And you can see we had the morning range sort of this is the fuse line sort of tied to the morning range breakout because you can use it very effectively. So here is 68.56. We had that little false break against the first low. And from there, here, we just took off, came back, and I put this in because we held well above 68.56 and we reversed. So there's the second one. So basically, it's a tool to help you sort of manage the potential of the trend. That's one way to look at it. But I have a good description on the X. Both of us post a lot of stuff. NASDAQ, Ben post every day. S&P I'm posting, and both links. There are links in the description for both. Join us there. That's enough time. Let's move on to other things. What are you covering today, Ben? I know you're covering some of the commodities, right?
We'll have all the grains on, update those. We'll have a couple of the softs that look like they're setting up, and crude oil.
Crude oil, yep. Crude. We'll be looking at that in 1 second. All right, bonds first. We pushed through the 45-degree level, and remember we said, once it breaks out, we want to see if the counter trends hold above that level. And what is that level? That level is 16.5, 16.16. If we can hold above that, well, bonds are in a more of a positive side of the square. So we can get up into this 19.16, 19.5. That's the next stop. That's the bonds. Weekly, we have room to run. We have till about 19.5, 19.12 on the weekly. If we can get up, we can go up and test the high that we got, back in October. So that's the possibility. We'll see how the pullbacks go. Now we have a nice little floor set up around 16. So keep all that in mind. Bonds aren't exactly trending at this point, so we don't have to get too involved with it. But keep an eye. Crude, well, it's all working out. We had we talked about 61.61, and you see how beautifully that worked out. We we, we flushed out, came back higher lows, got into the above 61.61. We held. Then we were compressing between exactly. I mean, these guys know these levels have been here probably since the day you started watching us, and you can see how we compressed right in that range. It could have compressed anywhere, right? It could have been on either one, or above it or below it or straddling it, but we're compressing perfectly. And I drew that little triangle last week, and then we made a higher low. Here's the first low, higher low, and we broke. So now this is, crude's pretty prime. So long as we're above the 64.75, I think pullbacks can be bought, and check your buy side setups.
That's a
Probabilities are pretty good,
that's also
Yeah.
a perfect example of get on top, stay on top of the 6161.
Yeah, exactly. That's a
It
very good
failed, it
example of
failed, it failed, and then it got on top of
got
it,
on
and then it
top.
stayed on top. Yep.
Right. And you can see that's no easy job, to do that. So yeah, long as we're above that, watch it. And long as we're above 61.61, we're still firm, right? But watch the trend line. I think that's the one everybody's seeing and worthwhile watching. All right, take a quick look at the weekly. Weekly, we're just about ready to break above the weekly square level, and that is 66.50. But the more important one is this one. We talked about how the square has caught the low, and now we're starting to move higher. So from here, we're just going to be focusing on the counter trends and taking the trend. So here's a good one. If you guys have been watching, we were patient all through here, and now that we're starting to break, we can get in there and start trading it because there's a higher probability of them working out, if not for any other reason, right? Gold, well, gold's resting. It's going to need to get a rest here after that crazy, mind-boggling move. And we talked about that going into it, that it's, we're getting close to the end, and we hit the resistance. I think might have hit some squares, but the key thing now is to see how the consolidation goes. So after that move, we have to allow some time for the market to get a breather. And, I would look at this sequentially, meaning above 49.29, gold's in a very strong position, and very strong. 57.50, still strong, and above 50, 45.73, I would say it's firm, because if we can consolidate here and hold above, I think we can get another drive up. So watch those levels. I would use that as a guide. For now, it looks like it's consolidating, and let it be. And, just in passing, I think above 45.73 is fairly safe, and it looks like it might stay above that. Worst case, maybe we get down to 4,200. So still not bad. I'll do all the metals and then all the dailies, and then I'll do all the weeklies. Silver, moving on to silver, I've been talking about $72, so you can see we held it right above that, and well, 71.50, say 72, the Gann numbers, right? And then I think longest we're between 72 and 89. We're in pretty good shape. Expect the market to consolidate and be in a strong position. Worst case, we get down to 62.60, and that's still okay. But the key thing now is, really watching this 81. If we can hold above 81, higher chance of going high, moving towards the highs. And if we get below 81, longer consolidation. Right now, we're kind of straddling. The volatility is still high. Pretty big range, but we have it, 72 and 89 is the thing, and the midpoint is 81. I would use that as a guide, but it's still resting. Copper, once a high came in, we were expecting some kind of a correction, and we're doing that. Looks like we're doing it in time. So as long as we're above 565, I think the market's in pretty good shape. And I would use the midpoint as some kind of a pivot. So above 590, I think we're getting ready to run them back higher again. And if we're below 590, I think probably there's more correction left, time to correct. Above 590, I would expect it to be ready to move higher, test higher, maybe up into a 683 level. And below 590, I think the correction is going to continue on, and we'll have to let it get through. That's it for the metals. Let me quickly switch to the weekly charts. Here's gold. Not much to add because of the uh, just because of the range, you know. So as far as weeklies go, 48.15 is the lower boundary, and you can even use a quarter square here, you know, above 5,010, 5010 for more positive. So that's it. But I would stick with the dailies for now. Copper, silver, really quick. Silver, the key level here we have to get on top of on the weekly is 83, let's say $84. If we can get above 84 and hold, we are ready to, you know, we're primed to go. Basis the weekly, okay? Now you guys have the daily numbers already. And on the weekly, the lower level will be 74, 74.80, if you can hold above that. So, and we're right in the middle of it for the last 3 weeks. So let's watch that price action and see what we do. So long as we can obviously take out, for example, this week's high, not much, a whole lot to do. Let it rest. Copper, we're holding about 535, which is pretty good sign. You know, it's plenty of air between that and the lows. And the midpoint is 593, 594. So in here, it's very positive unless we break 535. Looks like we're going to hold here and drive up one more time. Let's wait for that. For now, you know, after the high came in, we're just consolidated like all the other metals. So not much to add to that.
They're definitely consolidating and correcting. We just have to see how it's going to play out.
Exactly. So far, you know, when you look at, you know, copper, silver, you know, they're holding the key levels, right? So all that means is we have upside potential left, but we don't want to discount it too early. All right, here's Bitcoin, and it's sort of playing out in a scary way because now we have a triangle forming, complex triangle. So, and we couldn't really get above the 68,580. That was the key. This is the key test, is that we want to be able to hold above 68,580. If we can do that, then we can test a little higher and go back and test the old support level that we held for, you know, a couple of months. So that's 79,990. So let's say 80,000. So we're going to go up. In order to test that, even, you know, halfway to that, we have to get above the 68.5. So watch for that. Watch the
It looks like
triangle.
it. Yeah, it looks like it's consolidating before another push lower. Truthfully,
Yeah, it doesn't look very encouraging, to
no.
tell you the truth. Mainly because of the price action here, we're tightening up on a very hard down leg, and we can't do that above key level, right? So let's see. And this sort of downsloping angle, you know, until we can get above that, the entire complex is weak to begin with. So there's that. And so if you just take an ABCD with obvious ABCD off this, and we get down to 52,000, what is it? Yeah, around 52,000. And this is the level that Ben, you had this. Ben's going to look at the weeklies and the monthlies.
Yeah, that's in there.
It's in there, right? So ABCD seems like the final destination. So let's see what happens. I'll leave it there for now. All right, moving on to the dollar. Oh my God, what a week. So we had the flush. That's how we called it out. And you guys can check the tapes on this. And we reversed immediately. You can see how the inside bars, you know, we took out the highs, boom, came back. Now the crucial test here was the pullback, right? The first counter trend. Okay, its counter trend held exactly on the 50% level, and we grind, you know, started to grind, moved higher, made a new high. Let's see if we can continue this next week. Again, currencies aren't always clean, but generally, if we can hold above, you know, 97, and the 50% is around 96.50. So 96.50, 97, if we can hold above that, I think this flush is done and we can expect the dollar to move higher. We'll look at the weeklies in a second. Let me cover euro and then we can. So the euro, I mean, you guys know how I've been talking about this. We had this high, it was all fake. So that came back down. Here's the next resistance was here. Talked about that being selling that. So that's 1934 around there. Well, from there, so we have a high, a lower high, and we had the initial low, and now we have a lower low. I would say, I mean, you guys are to make it easier for your systems. Above 1789, I would be looking for some kind of a counter trend reversal. Below that, we're looking for weakness. It might not let go that easily, but the trend looks like it looks like we're done with the highs. And the dollar flush, euro, false break, everything's looks like in line so far. So until something changes, I'm just going to treat it that way and trade it that way. And finally, we might get a break on these things. Dollar weekly, as far as I'm concerned, it's perfect. We got this flush. We talked about that, and you guys know 95.50 was on the board before it got there, and it held there, reverse. We were looking for, if that was a flush, we need immediate reversal, which we got, and it held. You can see, it held above this 96.75 level. Fine. Could it get above this other support zone that we had? We haven't yet. So we're squeezing between the main level, square level, and we're squeezing between that and the old support level. So I guess the big battle now is, once we can get above this, so once we can clear this 97, 97.80 and settle above the zone, or at least in the zone, right? It's positive. And it's a weekly chart. So let's give it the time. But I think the danger is done. We came back and flushed it out. And we kind of had three drives, not the cleanest three drives in the world, but we have that. This drive is not really a big winner, but there it is. So yeah, that's the dollar. And the euro held together. We talked about the 1 bar counter trend and the reversal. So all that worked out from the lower time frames all the way on to the weekly. So we have the weekly reversal. We have the false break about that. We had the 1 day counter trend, 1 bar counter trend, and now we're lower. So let's see how that plays out. The big support level we want to watch is 1648, 1654, 1648, 1650, a couple of tips. So if we can work that up and get under that, I think then we can get some kind of a trend going. But for now, we're sure we're on the short side, but we want to watch that carefully. Any counter trends that can't make these levels or can be sold. That's my take. All right. I think that's all I have. Ben, let me put it to you because we got a lot to cover.
That was really good coverage.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. It's a lot to cover, and the markets are all over the place, eh? But some things
Yeah.
are starting to get some traction, like the crude and the dollar.
Yeah, we're starting to see and this money come into commodities, but we'll get to that. Let's quickly cover
Yeah.
NQs and Bitcoin. So on the NQs, as Barry said, that 25,100 area is important. You can see here 25,000 is the quarter square, three-quarter square here. It has been acting as support when we were above it and resistance now that we're below it. And where do we close? Right near it. So watch that level daily basis. I drew in this ABCD in
Mhm.
case that's what we're doing. Just a simple ABCD would take us down into this, 23,000 and change support area. And importantly, it would take us through this half square, which has been pretty solid support since September, as you can see.
Mm.
So getting through that may, make this ABCD just be a sort of a stopping point as opposed to a destination, because that would be pretty big if we get through there.
Right, right. And
So
get
we
stuck
want to watch.
stuck below your level, like
That's right,
24,000, right?
and get stuck below. That's right. The other thing that I keep coming back to, and I want to make sure everyone knows this, because I in the daily post I do on the NQs, the short term, I always point this out. we got a significant reaction off the 90 high to high and 48 low to low, and 48 is in that Gann death zone, right, from 45 to 49. And we got a significant reaction off of it. So that means that, these highs here are significant, right? This timing that came in at this high here is significant. How it plays out, we're still trying to decipher that, but that was significant because of the reaction we got off of that high to high and low to high timing. Let's take a look at the weekly. And with the weekly, you get much more of a sense of, and the circle helps us that yes, it's sideways, but it's rolling, right? It's rolling over, it's curving. You can almost, feel it as you look at the chart with the circle there, because we had the high, we had a little lower high, and now we're sort of drifting down. We had that down bar off of the lower high, and now we've had two inside bars. And last week we took out the low of the previous inside bar. So let's see if we get follow through and weakness coming this week. Here's your monthly. You can see why that 24,000 level that we were talking about on the daily, if we get through that with the ABCD, why that would be important. Well, that means we would get through this 180, which is 24,000, 180 degrees up from the 2002 lows. That's a big number. And it held support previously, right, when we tested it. So getting through that would be a big deal. And you can see that here on the monthly. Anything you want to add, throwing the monthly in here, Barry, on the NQs?
Well, I think we just have to be patient and keep reading these tea leaves until we can get some clarity.
Right. So see, here's 24,000
Yeah,
on
it's
the
right there.
monthly,
Hmm.
and here's your daily. This is what we're talking about, this 23.9 to 24. See why
As
it's
long as we're above that, we have to, of course, be careful. And
yeah, yeah. It's because holding there would above here would be longer term bullish.
right. I mean, a level that's been held since September, you just have to be a little bit cautious and
Hmm.
with respect.
So watch the battle when we get to this.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very important. We'll get very, very important clues and signals off of that.
Mhm.
All right, let's jump over to Bitcoin, and we'll quickly go through Bitcoin so we can spend more time on the commodities. As Barry showed on the daily, we're winding up here. This to me portends weakness, right? Because we had a big down move, and this is all we're getting, from a rebound. And if you look at compared to the low on the way down, that's a lot of air between there, and we're not filling it at all. So I think odds favor one more push lower. If we get below this 62,000, then we're into the 50,000s here at the half square. Let's look at the weekly and the monthly. There's your 52 number, Barry, the full square
Hmm. Yep.
on the weekly. And notice this week's bar so far, we were crisscrossing the last 2 weeks. So far, this week's bar is below the half square. So we are clearing potentially the half square by staying below 70,646. So watch that number all week, because that's really important for a weekly basis. If we cannot get above that, we will have cleared it and the pressure will be down to 52. Let's look at the monthly. The monthly, because we started the month up here, the previous month we closed up here. The first, this bar is definitely going to be straddling that. The danger, though, in printing a bar down here in the next week is, we got to get above, print above 74.5, or else we'll have cleared that, and then 56 would be the target monthly basis. So things are stacking up for additional Bitcoin weakness, I would say right now. And until we get above, 70,600, that's where the pressure is going to be. So that's where we are on Bitcoin. Anything you want to add looking at the
No,
monthly or the
pretty
weekly?
good. No, we're good. You covered it.
All right, let's talk about the commodities. Money is coming into commodities. We highlighted the grains last week, and we've been highlighting soybeans and corn and wheat separately for weeks now, and they caught some legs this week, so we'll review those. The softs are either bottoming with divergences like sugar and cocoa is trying to do, and specifically, we're going to talk about cotton and coffee, and cotton has been going sideways for over 2 years now, almost 3 years. The metals Barry told you are correcting, and of course, we're going to talk about crude. Nat gas is just coming down into support, trying to see if it can find support and get some legs there. So there's nothing to do there. But since we have a lot to cover, let's get right into it. We'll start off with wheat. You can see we had a nice week here. And what are we seeing? Again, we're seeing this pattern huge sideways, right? Oh, this is boring. There's nothing going on here. Ah, here we had a little flush, right? And we're holding the full square. Low, false break low, high, higher low, higher highs, and here we go. So this week, daily basis, watch 570. We stay above that. That's the quarter square. It should help us get this push up next into this half square of 641. Let's give you the weekly perspective. It's a nice weekly bar. And hey, look at that. See what happens when you clear a half square?
Yep,
The
yep.
low of this past week's bar was above the half square, and it gives us that launching sort of pattern. And what do we have now on a weekly? We've got a low, we've got a high, got a higher low, and now a higher high. 608 will be the next area. Three quarters of the square, 608 will be the next area where there's going to be a little bit of a battle because you can see we did highs in this area before. But once we clear that, then 681 full square. So it's just developing nicely and doing what a market does as it's advancing and in a bull market. Let's take a look at the weekly. I'm sorry, this is the monthly. Big up bar 595 here is going to be obviously a very important level. It acted as resistance here when we were below it, and it acted as support previously over in here as well. So 595 will be a very key level. We could test it this week, so let's watch it and see. But getting above and staying above and sitting on top of that opens up the big move because then you can see this whole 3 4 year sideways drift down sideways, will be below us and act as support. And that's the sort of ballistics that you need to launch. Anything you want to add here on the wheat?
Only thing I can think of is to add more positions. It's
That's right.
well, you've been
Um,
talking about this, every couple of weeks,
mhm.
and well, now it's starting to move. Perfect.
Yep, it's starting to move. And that's why, don't get, especially with commodities, don't get, and currencies, don't get lulled to sleep when it's sideways. You
Exactly.
keep watching it, looking for those clues. All right, let's take a look at corn. This one's further along than wheat, but you can see the same type of bullish characteristics, right? We had a low, then we had almost a double bottom, but it was a higher low. It pushed up, failed at the full square, sharp pullback, right? This is that kind of scary ones that shake the trees, but it gave us another higher low, and here we go, starting to push again. So the next big area is this here where we, failed in November, December, and early January, 446, and it looks like we're going to go up and test that. If we can get on top and sit on top of that, then we've got higher prices in corn coming too. Let's look at the weekly. The weekly is just a beautiful chart, right? Technically, right? You have this,
Yep.
you put in a low, rallied up to the half square, failed, A, B, C, D down, higher low, get up on top of this full square, push up, pull back, higher low, and reverse. So watch 438 this week, and if we clear that, then 464. But the weekly is coming around and looking very, very positive. Here's your monthly. We're inside this month so far. The key level on the monthly, and you can see why when you look left, is this 463. See, this was a big base. It was below 463. Once we got above it, we launched into those highs. Same thing over here. basing below, launch up once above, pull back below, launch up once above. So corn, watch your 463. That seems to be the light diffuse for the monthly light diffuse level. Anything to add on corn?
Oh, we're good.
Now we can go look at the star of the grain so far, and that's
I mean, can't say we haven't talked about the grains in about 6 to 8 months
no,
here,
no.
looking back. Just
We've
like
been
gold,
what?
gold and silver, we talked about it when it was really boring and nothing happening. And
Yeah, and here's another excuse me, here's another example of the boring that turns into the exciting.
Mhm.
Low, higher low again, little false break here, then we start up, sharp pullback, but look where the pullback came, right to support, right to
Yeah,
that full square.
place where you add.
Yep. And then we get this nice move off and looks like this coming week will push up and make a higher high. 1170 is the key level here. That was, in the areas of this old high back in November. And if we can push above that, then it's 1216 is the full square. Let's take a look at the weekly. Remember a few weeks ago, actually it's
Yep.
now a few months ago, we talked about this. Hey,
Hmm.
it's pulling back, it's testing this 1060 level and this big base that we had built. This is just a test. If we hold here, we're going to get the launch, and here it comes. So weekly basis, 1171 we want to clear. We clear that. We're looking at 1283 on the full square. And that'll be an important spot too, because you can see here it was support before. So this will be a key spot. For now, 1171 is what we want to watch weekly. Let's look at the monthly. Monthly gives you the same picture, but it also shows you. That's why these longer term charts are really good for perspective. Why this 983 support was so important. I mean, look back, look at the history here. How important that level was. And so we held it here. We pushed up. Here's your retest, and now we have a big monthly up bar. So monthly basis, 1131 next month. We want to see us stay on top of that. If we do that, then 1200, then 1275. So I mean, odds favor beans are heading into the 1200s
Hmm.
right now, the way the structure is and the price action. Anything catch your eye on beans here?
Well, we're good. Just waiting for more counter trends. This is the time to do those. Trade the counter trends.
Mm-hmm. All
I
right,
mean, we're off the gate. So
let's go talk about the softs now. Sugar, I'm not gonna review the charts, but it looks like it's completing this down move, and we had a little bit of a reversal. I want to watch how the pattern develops this week, but put sugar on your radar. And here's one I did not think I would be talking about this week. It's cotton. Now, I'm not kidding you. When you look at the weekly, monthly, this thing has been going sideways for years. And lo and behold, look at what we've done. So this was a low, and then it's back into the range and sideways and boring and drifting down. And then we make a little bit higher low. You can call it a double bottom if you want. And then look at the move out of this.
yeah.
And look at the move on Friday. This tells me, something's up.
Hmm.
It's super early, but something has changed here, right? The price action looks different. Now, where are the big tests going to be? 65.39. We want to see us clear this on a daily basis. And then 68.26 is big. Right? But we have a low, we had a high, pull back. Now we have a higher high, higher low and higher high. That's the stuff you want to start seeing. So get cotton on your radar if it's not already. Now let's look at the weekly and monthly, and you can really see how long this thing's been going sideways. Look at that.
Wow.
Since June of 24, basically sideways with the drift. So what's the most important thing here on the weekly basis, right? We had this low and then boom, two weeks we reversed and go right up. And look at this. We were inside for about 10 weeks here. I mean, that's how boring this thing has been.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, weekly basis 66.41. That is the number we want to watch this coming week. Can we get above it and stay above it? That's the big number weekly basis. Let's take a look at the monthly. There's your monthly. We've been inside, and we still are since April of last year. Inside bar, inside bar, inside. All these are inside bars. But if you notice, it's the off the Ukraine war start highs. We're about breaking that trend line right now.
Kind of a
Monthly
big deal.
basis, yeah, 66.27. So next month, we want to see if we rally up this last week, and next month we can print a low above 66.27. This is going to open a pathway towards much higher prices. The other thing with this, Barry, why this may be different, because you could say, oh, it was going sideways here and we had this false move. And what's the big deal? High to low, 45 months.
Very big deal.
High to low, 45 months.
Mm.
This thing loves doing 90s and 45s.
Mm.
So that this low could be significant given that this monthly timing of 45 months we have in here. So let's watch it. We're early, but we're going to watch that. All right, next let's go. Cocoa and sugar doing the same thing. Cocoa's not quite ready yet, but it's trying to bottom. And then we have a few squares that showed up, so we're going to watch the price action on that. For now, let's take a look at coffee. Okay, why are we looking at coffee? High to low, we did 90. That's a good square, right? 90 in time is very good. We also have a little false break here and a reversal. See the false break here
Yep. Yep.
with this low back in last June, July. So we did a false break, and then they said, nope, we don't like that price down there. Let's run this back up. So this coming week, I'm watching to see, can we get another push higher and then sit? Ideally, if we can sit on the pullback on top of this 290, we'll have a nice long setup here. So it's early. Again, it's early. We just had it this week, but there are signs here that there may be a trade to the upside. And it may end up being just like a big counter trend trade, but a pretty big move is possible here. I'm not saying this is the start of a bull market, but it could be a nice counter trend trade. Let's look at the weekly. Weekly, you can see the false break. You can see that we closed the week above this important line here, this 50% of the square. And where could we rally here? We could certainly rally up to 305, but I'm thinking more like the 330 or the 350 up in here. So that's the weekly. And you can see the move down was really something. We caught part of that, which was nice. And let's look at the monthly. You see the fall. You can even see the false break on the monthly. So 332 again would be a reasonable number to see, a rally back from here. So pretty significant move when you're talking about the price currently, around 280, 285. So it's early on coffee, but I think a counter trend rally trade is setting up based off of the timing and the false break here. So watch that this week. Let's see. And the last one we've got is crude oil. Very covered crude. Just going to give you another quick look here. Again, boring chart drifting. Then we started getting false breaks, higher lows. And now look what we're doing. We're holding important levels. Failed here, pulled back. This is where, we're testing it. Couldn't get above. Here, get above, couldn't stay above. Now we get above and we stay above and we go. Next key number, I think you have the same numbers, Barry, around 68. Once we can get
Mm-hmm.
on top of 68, it's, 73, 74. That's the daily. Let's take a look at the
Nice
weekly.
chart. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Weekly, we're banging our head up against important level here at 67. But get above it and stay above it, right? Then all this becomes support. And look at how important this level is. Here it was support, 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 resistance, resistance. So this is really, really a key spot. If we get on top of here, we could get into like the aggressive movement phase in crude to the upside. So watch that 67 level this coming week. And here's the monthly circle chart. Always want to include that so you can see it. We've got a higher high this month. So this is our second month in a row of printing higher highs. Here, 71 is key, 71.59. If we sit on top of that, then it's, you have monthly, jet fuel comes in for this thing. It'll turbocharge the move up. So everything's shaping up, as you would expect and as you would want in a bull market. Really, the key level this week is 67. Let's see how we handle it and how we can move on that. Anything you want to add on crude? Looking at the longer term charts.
No, I think I covered everything. Well, it's just a matter of trading and watching the counter trends. And obviously, we have to watch out for this near term volatility a little bit. But we cleared the numbers.
Yeah, and bigger picture, the thing I'm seeing, money is coming into the commodity space.
That's the ticket, exactly.
The ones
Exactly.
that have been basing for a while are breaking out.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that have been going down are now starting to, begin to form bases and stop going down. So
Mm-hmm.
this process is happening.
Some of these tech
Uh,
is getting sold.
it could be tech, it could
Software,
be
Mm-hmm.
metals, it could be coming from metal. Who knows, right? But there's money coming into this space, so we're picking up on that, and hopefully you guys can take advantage of it and enjoy it. That's all I got. Everybody have a great weekend. We are certainly still expecting bigger moves, even, the boring stuff like we were talking about the S&P and NASDAQ, how they've been in these ranges. It's no different than what happens, in these commodities when they range for a while and you get bored and frustrated, then big moves
Forget.
come. Yeah, big moves come. So
Mm-hmm.
rest up and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great week, everybody. Great job, Barry, and we'll talk to you next week.
Good job, Ben. All right, very good. You guys have a great week, and we'll catch you next weekend. Take care.
Take care. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.